in 314 for a shooting at Century Theaters. They're saying somebody's shooting in the auditorium.
Roger, keep your fires west of the smoke. You're cleared hot. An officer hit. Send me the world.
Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again.
Welcome to Tactical Tangents.
Welcome back to Tactical Tangents. This is Mike. This episode is brought to you by DVIDS Outdoor, your go-to source for lightweight, portable, and versatile lighting solutions built for the outdoors and beyond. Whether you need scene lighting for public safety emergencies or reliable area lighting for your campsite, DVIDS has you covered. Their LED lanterns offer variable outputs and color options with Bluetooth remote controls that provide a complete ecosystem of lighting in a compact and easy-to-deploy package. These lights are perfect for camping, hunting, search and rescue, crime scene processing, and nighttime operations. DVIDS optimizes your experience and alleviates your pain points with extra power banks, solar panels, and more. DVIDS Outdoor ensures that you have long-lasting portable lighting no matter where you are. Check out their lineup at DVOS outdoor.com or find them on Amazon. Again, that's DVOS outdoor.com. This episode was also brought to you by Lowa Boots. Start your day off on the right foot with footwear that was designed for those who stand relentlessly in the face of adversity. I wear Lowa every single day, for miles on canine searches and for hours on tactical operations in inclement weather. No matter what, Lowa keeps me moving. Whether you run, hike, hunt, or fight, on the streets or out in the woods, Lowa has the gear you need to help you conquer whatever challenges you face. Go check out their new line of trail running shoes at Lowa Boots, L-O-W-A boots.com, and get outside for some fresh air and daylight. Lowa, for those who know where they're going and won't stop until they get there. Over the years, we've seen a lot of attention and a lot of institutional shifting in kind of weird ways and predictable ways, I suppose, but lots of different ways, I think, related to active shooters or active assailants or active attacks, whatever we're calling them in 2025.
We have a couple episodes about this, and I've discussed this before. Like, I specifically don't like the lingo active shooter, partly because it's got political connotations, but more important in the context of our podcast, I think it causes responders and planners to discount the possibility of any other threat vector than shooting, like explosives or vehicle ramming or fire.
Yeah, and this has been when I say this institutional shifting thing, a lot of it has to do just with the way information gets disseminated now, and you have a lot of really thoughtful people that are trying to address these problems collectively, and I think we like to put things in a bin, right? We like to categorize them into one place, and it's all of the thought and effort that's gone into this leads us to have a bunch of new names that all basically mean the same thing. And one of the big shifts that has happened over the last, decade or two has to do with getting medical care to the victims of one of these types of attacks. And when we think about that problem, right, there's the active murdering or killing that's happening. But we also need to deal with the people that we can get to that need our help. And so there's kind of several efforts that happen at once. And so from a doctrine standpoint, we talk about stop the killing, stop the dying. And that's good philosophically, but logistically a lot more challenging, right? And so with that, we've seen a lot of things like stop the bleed courses, which are great, right? We're pushing this out to the lowest levels of the community. We're treating bystanders and people who might be involved within the community in something like this as the first responders, right? The people that are calling 911 and getting them involved in being part of the solution. You know, schools are addressing this in a lot of ways. We're also seeing more advanced things like Rescue Task Force, where we're integrating fire and police resources to build some security into a warm zone to facilitate some level of treatment and maybe some evacuations and stuff like that.
Yeah, and most of this is just assumed by the people calling 911 that, like, you call 911, the cavalry's going to arrive and, like, fix you and save you and take down the bad guy and do the things,
and
right?
It's all worked out.
And historically, that isn't true. And we've done case studies on this just not happening, right?
Not at all, yeah.
And Mike and I have been talking about this for a while, and he's mentioned to me I don't know, maybe a dozen times last year, like, hey man, like we are seeing fire as a weapon becoming more of a thing, and we probably need to talk about it. So I think that's what we're going to talk about today. But we're gonna get there kind of obliquely, I think.
Yeah.
So a few military considerations here. Usually in a military context, when we say Rescue Task Force or RTF, we really mean a Personnel Recovery Task Force, PRTF. And that is like helicopters and A-10s and PJs, pararescue jumpers. They're going in to pull a downed aviator out of harm's way. That's not what we're talking about, right? A Rescue Task Force is like an active shooter at a base. And we get the fire department and the medics and the cops all going all kind of at once in a coherent way, cohesive way. And increasingly, I'm seeing this getting used by military first responders, which is cool. Where we're doing exactly that, getting the firefighters and the paramedics closer to the tactical action in a active hostile event, right? This month specifically, the 36th Wing out in Guam at Anderson Air Base, they posted photos of their work doing exactly this. And shout out to General Polensky out there. It is inspiring to see how seriously they're taking readiness. So something's working. Now, jumping around a little bit on you, for a combat context, not, active shooter kind of thing, but in fighting, like big combatant fighting, right? Fire has been a weapon since, I don't know, man created fire. It is literally a chapter in Sun Tzu's Art of War. It's called, I don't know, like Fire, chapter 12. Like literally, look it up. And so Sun Tzu, which I always like to come back to because he wrote all the fortune cookies about this, he said there are 5 ways of attacking with fire. Burn the soldiers in their camp. Burn their stores. Burn their baggage trains, which is like the supplies on the move. Burn their arsenals and magazines. Hurl dropping fire amongst the enemy. In short, Sun Tzu thought fire was cool and that you should probably use it. Agreed. And in fact, that is still in play. Consider flamethrowers in World War II or drone strikes against Russian invaders. We are seeing fire consistently used as a combat weapon.
Napalm,
napalm, white phosphorus, Willie Pete, all the things, right?
Yeah.
And we're seeing it literally day to day in Ukraine, which is, if you're not paying attention to what's going on there, you're not paying attention to where war is right now, let alone where war is going to go in 1 to 5 years, right?
And there's a lot of reasons. If you think about the Sun Tzu stuff, like think about the psychological, emotional, the chaos component that comes with that.
Oh yeah.
And it's actually kind of amazing that it's taken until the 2020s to start, on some level getting organized. And it's not because it's new, right? It's just that these days, a lot of the innovation happens pretty quick and it's kind of tough to keep up with. And when you think about getting organized for like the Rescue Task Force thing that we're talking about on the public safety side, that sounds really straightforward if you're just the person calling 911 and assumes that's figured out. But recognizing how rare of a thing that is that we actually have to do, or at least seemingly so, realistically, we actually do it in a sense kind of every day, right? But not at scale.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, fire technologically isn't all that advanced. I mean, we're sticking on drones. I guess that's technological. And human to human, it's not all that crazy. I mean, you can scare someone with fire, but it's fire at the end of the day. The problem is institutional.
Yes.
Right? At the organizational level, there's the way fire departments do things and the way cops do things.
Yes.
And they're often stovepiped.
Right.
Right?
And yeah, they compete with and contradict each other in a lot of ways. And like I said, on some level, when you think about Rescue Task Force, cops go to a domestic violence scene, they make the scene safe, the cops come in and do it. It's not functionally all that different, except you're doing it at scale where now you're at a school and I can make part of the problem a little bit safer, but not totally safe. And so you start working in the gray. And I think Jim's point about the institutional stuff is a big deal when it comes to how do you like cross the streams. And one of the things when I talk about tactics development with some of my teammates, and some of the ways that on my tactical team the mission has changed over the years that I've been on the team, I always like to point out the difference between like the internal and external friction points. And what I mean by that is there are certain things that I cannot control on any given operation. The actions of the suspect being one of them in a lot of cases. I might be able to limit his options, but he has free will, right? The enemy gets a vote. The weather, the lighting, the traffic conditions, other people of the public, the structure that we might be working in and around. Now, again, there are times where maybe I can dictate, do I want to launch this assault right now or not? But there's a lot of external stuff there, right? And then there's the internal stuff. Like I mentioned, if we have an option, if we get to choose when we're going to make this apprehension or this arrest, now we get to set the stage a little bit. And we need to think about that. When it comes to inter-team communication stuff, those are friction points that we can affect. And we have to make sure that we differentiate that stuff. So when it comes to police and fire working nice together, those are the things that we have to kind of iron out as those friction points. And when I talk about innovation happening quickly, and we talk about the rescue task force, and historically we've seen this kind of thing be necessary enough times, right? But we can take all the guidance and the case studies out there. You still got to figure out meaningful ways to employ those lessons and ideas and get them out to the quote unquote lowest common denominator, right? What we're hoping is that the engine company that shows up at 2:00 in the morning and the cops that show up at 2:00 in the morning can be more or less on the same page. And that's a lot more challenging than it sounds, unfortunately. The one thing that we know when you look at this problem, and this is leading us into the fire as a weapon thing, I promise, but there's a reason when I talk about like tactics development and just like the doctrine and the institutional stuff that Jim brings up, where I'm going with this is the lines among first responders are getting blurrier and blurrier. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, I wish there was a better word for it. I don't know if like more integrated or blended or joint or unified. I don't know what words are the best for this. But
in the Air Force, we call it multi-capable airmen. That's do more with less. That's how we do it.
Yeah. But where I'm going with all of this is if all that active shooter, active killer stuff wasn't already complicated enough, I want to talk a little bit about my new job as a firefighter.
You're getting paid for that, right?
I don't know. And you might say to me something like, but Mike, I thought you're a cop. I thought you're an EMT and a dog handler, not a firefighter. And mostly you're correct. My job title hasn't changed. I don't have any certifications as a firefighter. I haven't done any real formal training. But the landscape and the environment around me has changed. Right? My job hasn't changed necessarily, but the landscape and the environment has. And so we're going to talk about how this fire as a weapon problem leads us to teaching SWAT guys how to use fire hoses and stuff.
So I got to jump in just on that about kind of a recurring theme, I think, in law enforcement in the last 15 years. And a recurring theme on this podcast is how many things we stack on cops. Right? How many responsibilities? You have to be a therapist. You have to be a hostage negotiator. You have to be an expert tactician and marksman. You have to be a good driver. You have to be morally straight and righteous. And also, we're going to pay you whatever it is, $20 an hour, $30 an hour, plus overtime. Right? The number of expectations we are putting on cops is really genuinely kind of out of hand for what we're paying them. And I think all of society needs to stop and thinking about what really do we expect, and are we paying appropriately, right? The cop union didn't tell me to say that. It just it's a recurring theme. It's something I keep seeing, right? So, Mike, we had a weird thing happen in my town, like just down the road from me in my neighborhood, a couple of weeks ago. A dude was running around a neighborhood acting sus. That doesn't happen in this neighborhood. This is a nice, cool, calm, quiet neighborhood. The cops showed up. They didn't see anyone, but then they noticed that a house in the neighborhood was on fire. Odd. So the fire department shows up. Yeah. We don't know at this point. So the fire department shows up. While they're fighting the fire, a dude runs out of the house that is on fire, steals an axe from the fire truck, and starts trying to attack the firefighters with the axe that he got from their fire truck. Fortunately, the cops were already there, and they shot and they killed him before he could maul anybody with the axe. I don't know that he used fire as a weapon, but fire was there, and weapons were there, and cops were there, and firefighters were there, and it all ended as well as it could under the circumstances. And I'm sure it was a rough day for my otherwise sleepy town, but it kind of got me thinking about, like, how often do you see stuff like that? And when I talked to Mike back and forth, like, he's like, yeah, it's like every day here in Southern Arizona.
I got a real good story that starts very similar to that one, actually.
Yeah. And so just conceptually, when I think doctrinally what we're trying to do here, cross-training matters. And this is a good example of why the diversity of background matters, right? Think about the types of people you're trying to hire. When you're putting together a SWAT team, it might be really helpful to get a guy or a gal who worked in construction and knows, like, how buildings are put together. It might really help to have a guy who was a firefighter at some point. It might be useful to have, like, a day where cops learn stuff about firefighters and vice versa. You need to know their language and how they solve problems. And when I think about diversity, that's got kind of all kinds of connotations in this day and age, but, like, diversity of background can really help you stack the odds here.
Yeah, that's something I think that I've noticed when you're considering a team environment, right? The essence of teamwork and how everyone brings something to the table, right? And it might not be the same stuff. Like, if you have a group within an organization and everyone really values, like, physical fitness, or everyone's really socially outgoing and it's like the cool kids, like the frat boys or whatever, like, or the jocks, right? Like, consider what things you might be short-sighted on if you're not, quote unquote, inclusive. And I know that's a hot button word now.
It's not about being squishy. It's about being combat effective.
Right.
Or scene effective. Right.
And like, maybe you need the nerd, right? Like, maybe you need the dweeb with the podcast on your team. I don't know. but it does play into it for sure. So this fire as a weapon thing is not new. There are ancient examples of this. If you go and you search for this, there's a lot of warfare examples.
It's in the Bible.
Yeah, right. There's, like, we talked about World War II, like Vietnam. There's a bunch of examples like that. But when we get into the use of fire as a weapon in more like domestic scale type things, not warfare per se, one of the prominent examples that comes to mind was this casino attack in the Philippines. It happened in 2017. This dude who apparently had some kind of gambling debt. I don't know. He was maybe had a gambling problem. Walked into a casino in the Philippines with a rifle, a pistol, and a gas can. He shot up a bunch of people. He set some gaming tables on fire, and then he tried to steal a bunch of casino chips and ran upstairs to a hotel room where he set himself on fire and then shot himself. Wild, right? Like, crazy. There was something like I want to say it was 40 people were killed and like 70 were injured. Don't quote me on that. You can look it up. The 2017 Philippines casino fire. ISIS claimed responsibility for that attack. I don't know if there was ever any real connection.
And that doesn't sound very.
It doesn't, especially with the whole like the motive situation and the gambling debt at a casino. I mean, who knows, right? But
sure.
Notably, in that part of the commentary about ISIS supposedly claiming responsibility, a lot of the like Al Qaeda publications and stuff, they've been suggesting this on the terrorist front for some time, to use fire as a weapon. So that is a thing. That's a known thing. Domestically, we had some examples in U.S. law enforcement specifically related. The Waco incident, which we did an episode on. This is where a doomsday cult.
That fire set itself.
Well, yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah. So
obviously,
where we're going with that is this doomsday cult was holed up in this compound. Federal agents held the compound under siege in an effort to further their investigation, with maybe some reports of people being held against their will. Who knows? There was some tear gas that was used to try to compel people out, and a fire occurred.
And tanks. There were also tanks.
Yeah. So there's some debate about, like, did they use burning gas munitions that started the fire, or did the people inside start the fire? And that's something that can be heartily debated. Doesn't change the outcome. There's no clear answers. No one really knows. But the gas canister thing is a reasonable theory. And related to that, we also had the Christopher Dorner incident. We also did an episode on, where this former LAPD officer went around killing a bunch of cops, holed himself up in a cabin. He was still shooting at the cops, and basically their way of getting them out was they use burning munitions to either gas them out, make them run out where they can deal with them, or let them burn. And that was his choice, and he ended up self-inflicting and killing himself. But considering the danger and everything, that was one of those, like, it seemed warranted under the circumstances. We did an episode. You can go look at that. But those are some domestic law enforcement examples of fire as a weapon. But we also see other examples. I think of Jim's thing, and I'm going to come back to an example that I have, but where fire was used to draw resources in as like an ambush, right? And then launch an attack. We've seen people who barricade themselves and they're looking for some way of escaping. And again, they can use that as a distraction and maybe feign some movement, something like that. Lots of examples of civil unrest and riots and things like that. People start setting things on fire, Molotov cocktails, that sort of thing. And then you could have like one of those complex coordinated attacks where, like I said, the nudging of whatever terrorist publications are out there are suggesting these sorts of things. But the reason I wanted to talk about it is this is a problem set that I'm really curious who else is exploring this among my peers in law enforcement, just across the institution. And if so, if they are addressing it, how and what things they're learning. We don't necessarily do a great job of sharing, getting our heads together on things like this. And what comes to mind is we did an episode a little while back where I talked about tubular assaults, and like every agency, every tactical team in the country has the example kind of set by the FBI when they started doing tubular assault stuff when airlines were getting hijacked for fun. And now everyone's just kind of left to figure it out on their own. And I honestly couldn't tell you how our neighboring regional SWAT team that works next door to us does a lot of tactics the same or differently than we do. There are a lot of things I know about the team, but there's a lot that I don't. And this is one of those problems that, like, everyone's kind of in their own little silo, on their own little island, figuring out how to deal with this stuff. And we should probably get ahead of that and talk about it. And so I'm here to kind of do my part in sharing that information out to other teams or agencies that might be looking at this sort of thing. But I'm also curious what everyone else is doing and what things you guys are learning. So locally, I mentioned some examples. We've been seeing a lot of this the last 5 or 10 years. And often it's people who are just mentally ill and in crisis setting their apartment buildings on fire and stuff.
They don't have a gun, but they got a lighter in their pocket.
Yeah, or both. I mean, we've had that too. More on that example in a minute. But we're having a lot of stuff like that. Just people setting their goddamn houses and apartments on fire, and that presents another angle on all of this, right? Like the fire department isn't gonna come to fight the fire if their scene isn't otherwise safe, and if there's a desperate and armed person on the loose, right? There's, now we have this problem, right? So then you see guys like me who now have to go take up a fire hose and try to deal with this fire somehow, just like I always wanted, just like I obviously signed up for. I'm kidding. but this is something that's like, pipe. It's become like a real thing, right? Like a real problem. So the biggest and craziest story I can think of for this happened to us in 2021. So just a few years ago. And this guy lit his house on fire several months prior. He blamed the fire department for the death of his parents in that fire, the fire that he set. And he sets his house on fire again. And prior to the fire department getting there, he had murdered his girlfriend. He murders a neighbor across the street from him who I think heard the commotion, came out to confront him. Boom, shot him. The house is now starting to go up in flames. He drives off. There's an ambulance staged around the corner. I don't know if they were already there just hanging out or they were staging off for this fire maybe. But he drives up to this ambulance and shoots the 2 EMTs in the ambulance. One of them was killed. One of them survived. Then he heads back over towards his house that's on fire because the fire department's starting to show up. And they get followed in by this dude in his car. And he ambushes the engine company and starts shooting at them. Somehow, none of the firefighters involved in that were killed, but he did shoot the captain who survived. They egressed into the neighborhood. He took off as the cops were showing up. One of my coworkers shot and killed the dude. And now those guys who were just shot at had to wrestle with the house that's still on fire and the unknown potential of other people being inside. Just a wild, crazy scene. By the way, that engagement between the officer and the suspect, I want to say that was a 43-yard pistol shot. 41, 42, 43 yards, something like that. It was over 40-yard pistol shot. That dude did an awesome job. And he recently got promoted to supervisor, which I'm glad to see. So then they go into firefighting mode. And again, there's a lot of not knowing, the chaotic scene, right? Lots happening. There's an ambulance down the street that's been shot at. One guy gets killed. The fire captain gets shot at. There's a shooting that occurs between the suspect. There's a dead girlfriend at the house. There's a dead neighbor, right? And so when they go to start attacking this fire, one of our SWAT team leaders who was working in patrol at the time basically puts on one of their breathing apparatus. We have self-contained breathing apparatus. We use them in SWAT. He didn't have it out in the field, but we do train with that. And I'll come back to that at the end of this when we get into some equipment stuff. But we do train with SCBA, self-contained breathing apparatus, but obviously we don't carry it around with us. So in this case, one of our SWAT supervisors was able to wear their equipment and provide long gun coverage while they attacked the fire from the outside. So basically they started attacking the fire by taking windows from the exterior and trying to look for victims as best they could from the outside before they were ultimately went in there to put the rest of the fire out. So pretty wild example. Again, that's like the more extreme outside of like your big terror type attacks. That was a pretty significant one for us that we dealt with. We've had a number of others, just barricaded people. I mentioned some people just mentally ill in crisis that set their apartment buildings on fire. or started fires in their apartments or started their houses on fire, people who were barricaded. We've had stuff like that. The protests and the riots that we've had over the years, we've had buildings set on fire, Molotov cocktails, dumpsters set on fire, pushed out into the middle of the street, blocking roads. And so I just wanted to use some of that experience to share some of the ways that we have adapted to this problem and hopefully get your juices flowing just a little bit.
So now that we've established that it is a problem, and I don't know whether it is truly trending worse or not, or whether we're just getting more aware of it.
Visibility, yeah.
Right? And we're in a position where we can exchange lessons learned. So what are your lessons learned?
So there's a lot to unpack in this, obviously, right? The one of the biggest things is cops don't know shit about fire. The reason I bring that up is because what might be well intended can actually be problematic, right? So for example, if you start opening doors and windows in an effort to try to help someone, right? You actually change the environment. You potentially are inserting more oxygen into the flames, right? And so you don't want to do things like that unless you're prepared to fight the fire, right? To insert water to displace some of that heat, right? And the oxygen that's going to fuel that fire. So just little things like that, like just some do's and don'ts, just getting out some like, hey, actually that was a really bad idea and here's why. And again, it's coming from a good place. Like the cops think they need to go get through a window or a door because they think someone might be in trouble, and that could be problematic, right? So just understanding a little bit about the fire science and like how to deal with fires, and that's taking out the fire as a weapon side of it. That's just fires in general, right? That's just you're the first one on scene of an apartment or a house fire, and you think that you might want to help. Related to that, and I've seen this as well, like not realizing the dangers of getting too close and inhaling some of that stuff. I've seen some really well-intended officers that want to save lives, their heart's in the right place, but you have to be able to look at a fire and say like, that's manageable or survivable or not.
Their heart was in the right place, but their esophagus wasn't.
Yeah.
Right? Breathing in superheated gases, that kind of thing. You've mentioned environment a couple of times, and just something that I think is real important in this discussion. I need you to recognize when you're standing in a tinderbox. Right? That kind of tactical sense of I'm in a kill zone. Right? You should get tingly about that. If you're standing in a place that is flammable, that should stand out. Any place could burn. A modern apartment building can burn, but it's also going to have things like sprinklers, right? If you're in a shed, like a wooden shed or a brush or something like that, like recognize when you are in an environment that is conducive to a nasty fire or to getting trapped in an environment where there is fire. Right.
Yeah, having an ingress and egress, like a way out for sure. And to be clear, nothing about this episode, I hope, is intended to sound like I'm suggesting you ever go into a burning building, unless that is the sort of thing that you signed up and got trained for and do that for enjoyment or whatever, right? So just so that's clear. But I know that there are a lot of cops out there, again, well-intended, that will take risks. And so what you don't understand about those risks, I think, is probably the first lesson learned in a lot of this is you think, oh, I'm going to do X, Y, or Z. And a fire guy goes, no. Whatever you do, don't do that. So I think just understanding some of that is like a good first step, right? Just how fire works, like where the hot gases go and why you don't want to take hot gases and insert oxygen into them by porting out windows and stuff like that, which is the thing that cops and especially SWAT teams tend to do is start breaking stuff, right? So just some exposure and some training about fire in general, I think is a good place to start. That was one of the things that now everyone on our team gets some, one of the captains that teaches at the academy comes out and he shows us these little burn box videos. We've actually taken our SWAT guys into the burn box. Everyone learns how to use fire hoses. which again, it sounds silly, right? You think just like spray water on the fire, pretty straightforward, but
see that fire? Put that water
on the fire.
On that fire.
But like, where do you point the water? And should you use a stream or more like a fan, right? Because you can adjust the nozzle on a lot of them. And how do you brace, depending on the size of the line, like how do you brace yourself? Because there's a lot of power that comes out of the end of that thing, and it's not a garden hose, right? It'll actually push you around a little bit, and you need to hold it a certain way, and sometimes you might need some help. So those things are actually useful little training and exposure pieces that you can get ahead of. Zooming out a little bit to this fire as a weapon problem, one of the most important aspects, and we say this in every big active killer type of situation debrief, right, is having unified command. What does that even mean, right? What that means is whoever is in charge of the scene on the PD side and whoever's in charge of the scene on the fire side need to get together and like be on the same page. That's what that means. And that doesn't mean like trying to talk about it over the radio or like we met one time for coffee. That means like, hey, Jim, what do you think about this? I don't like that because X, Y, and Z. All right, well, what if we approached it this way? And you start bouncing ideas and we get on the same page, right? Having those dudes like face to face, understanding each other's capabilities and limitations, and recognizing that this is a joint problem. This is our problem. It's not my problem and you're here on the sidelines or vice versa. Like, this is our problem and we need to work together to solve this. That is probably thing number one.
And who's ultimately in charge? So combined training matters, and that's at every level. Okay, so that's at the level of Mike running around with the fire hose, figuring out like he's a little guy and he needs maybe a big spoon to help him stay on the ground. And that's also at the who's the incident commander level, right? Or get the chiefs talking to each other, get a memorandum of agreement or whatever it is municipalities do. To get that, you need multiple levels of exercises. You need tabletop exercises, TTXs. Basically, that's a meeting where you talk through your approach and you teach each other as you work through a scenario. The next level is a command post or command staff exercise, CPX. That's where you have the command staffs and the lawyers talk to each other about who's in charge and who pays for what. And then next level up is an FTX, a field training exercise where you go out and train together in field conditions. And then a full profile where you do a full dress rehearsal. That sounds like a lot. And it is. And I understand when I ask you to do all that, like, yeah, okay, Jim, we're busy. We're catching guys who are stealing catalytic converters. We don't have time for your nonsense. It's like, yeah, that's true until you get the next big nasty disaster, right? You get the next Columbine where the kid is setting fire to the school or pulling the fire alarm and then shooting kids as they come out. And then this isn't just foo-foo. This is something we needed to have figured out last week.
And it's also something that, like I said, these other examples are happening all the time. That can't just be us. Yep. I don't... Look, the town I work in is a little rough sometimes, but like, there's no way that we're the only ones dealing with these sorts of things, and it's gonna come up. And I mean, gosh, we've been dealing with this enough when it's just one guy in a house that doesn't want to come out, and he's a little bit mentally ill. Just that by itself, if you can't manage that, how can you manage the casino, right? Like, be able to handle the small ones at least. And that's what I'm saying is just on these small ones, we're learning a lot, right? The unified command thing is a big thing. And what it really boils down to when you talk about unified command is trust and rapport and communication. That's what you need to figure out how to accomplish in these sorts of events, right? And there's a lot of like philosophical stuff there. It's understanding what we talked about earlier, institutionally, philosophically, what the police department and how they view risk, and the fire department and how they view risk, right? Doctrinally, firefighters and EMS workers are taught like scene safety, scene safety, scene safety, right? Ironic for a group of guys that run into burning buildings for fun, but different kinds of safe, different kinds of risk. And there are different strategies to approach. I mean, they still do risk management when it comes to firefighting. I'm giving my fire buddies a little bit of a hard time right there, but it's a different kind of risk when there's a bad guy, right? It does change the picture for them. And doctrinally, we're asking them to do something that is very, very different than what they've ever done. So recognizing that and being empathetic to that and say like, okay, well, what about in this scenario or that scenario? Like, what do you guys think? So there's like the big philosophical stuff, and then there's like the nitty gritty. Like, do we want everyone on the same radio channel? Because the things the cops are going to talk about with that incident are very different than the things the firefighters are going to need to talk about. There needs to be some crossover where we can be on the same page, but like, how do you organize that? And are your radio systems even capable of it? Just common terminology, right? Like, every time a cop uses a 10 code, a firefighter is probably looking at him like he's got a dick growing out of his forehead. Maybe don't use the 10 codes. Maybe get rid of 10 codes altogether because I think they're dumb, but that's another topic for another day. But use plain language.
Agree. Yeah. Sides of a building. Do you describe sides of a building the same way the fire department does and vice versa?
Yeah. One of the things that drive me a little bit crazy about my agency is, for whatever reason, it's been this way since I got here, and I don't know how to get just the inertia to change it, is people on our radios will still say Jim, they'll say Mike to Jim instead of Jim, this is Mike.
Yep.
Right? And
that's like every police agency in the country, as far as I can tell, talks that way.
I don't think that's true. The sheriff's department doesn't, which is, and ask me how I know, because every time we use their airplane and they come over to our radio channel, there's a little confusion because they do it differently than we do. But here's the thing. The way they do it is like the international standard, right? Like literally everyone in the world, like aviation, like the international standard is
who I'm calling, who I am, where I am, and what I want.
Like, oh, it just drives me nuts. But every time we talk to the fire department, because they can switch over to our channels, we can do that, right? But there's always some confusion a little bit when it comes to things. Who's calling who, right? So getting on the same page on some of the nitty gritty when it comes to like communications is a big part of it. But then having like trust and rapport with those guys. Maybe you stop by the station and you chat about it, or being able to go up to them and have that face-to-face conversation, because a lot of times what happens is you have like an on-scene, maybe police person in charge, and they get on the radio and like, hey, we need fire to do X. Well, it's impersonal, right? It's real easy for the fire department to be like, negative, we're not doing that. Very, very different than if you go, hey, what's up, man? I'm Mike, police department. Like, here's what I'm thinking. Is this something workable? Do you think this can work? Right? And then you hash it out and you build some rapport.
I would challenge you to get even past that. You think about like the team building stages of forming, storming, norming, performing, all that stuff. If you are not at the level of rapport where you can call each other out, where you can say, hey, that was fucked up. We need to not do that again. If you're still in the polite phases, that's better than nothing. But I need you at the stage of cohesion where you can get in a motherfucker calling contest and patch it up and move on.
Sure. In a perfect world. Yeah. By the time you've gotten there, though, you've sorted out a lot of this shit.
Yes.
And this is the thing, right? Is that when I talk about like some of the lessons learned is like you need to build that trust and rapport for this to work. And you need to have that communication that you're talking about worked out, right? You've got to get through some of that. And I don't expect that everyone out there, because we certainly didn't. Like, I'm here telling you these lessons, not because I think we've got it all figured out. A lot of this stuff we learned the hard way. One of those apartment fires I told you about, we did something really stupid. We went in there. The lady went out onto her balcony after setting her apartment on fire. And rather than trying to get her off from the balcony, which we could have pre-staged and arranged for ahead of time, we went through the door with the fire hose. We had a firefighter on our team, one of our tactical medics, with a hose in turnouts, but with a bunch of dudes not in turnouts, right, in that apartment with them. And we fucked up. Like we absolutely fucked up, and that's like in the PowerPoint now, right? That's one of the hard lessons learned. So like when I talk about the training and the exposure and saying like understanding a little bit of the fire behavior, that's what I'm talking about, right? We learned this stuff the hard way. We had those roadside conversations with the battalion chief or a captain somewhere that turn into the pissing matches. Like we've experienced some of that, and that's how we learned. And so that's what I'm here to tell you is like get ahead of that if you can. And like I said, it's not just there's the trust and the rapport side of it, but there's the nitty gritty too, like the radios and the terminology. And like Jim said, how you describe parts of a house, all those sorts of things, right? So build those relationships. And like I said, that can't just be the bosses. Jim alluded to this, right? Getting the chiefs together is one thing, making sure that like procedurally policy is in line with like, yeah, we're allowed to do these things to help each other out. But understanding that like the cops and the engine crew that show up at 2:00 in the morning when that thing is fully engulfed and there's a bad guy on the loose, that's where you need things to work out, like where the rubber meets the road. And that all boils down to relationships and relationship building. And you might have to do that on the fly, right? Like it would be great if you could do every level of exercise that Jim described a little while ago and have it all worked out. But realistically, I know that a lot of people dealing with this problem are going to have to figure it out roadside when it's live. And that's okay. But just understand that like that's a key part of this. And this comes up when we talk about Rescue Task Force a lot. We've come across engine crews or like old crusty veteran fire guys that are like, absolutely not doing that. That's not our job. That's not safe. Right. And they want to dig their heels in. But like, there comes a point when you're standing outside of that school and you go, okay, like engineer Jim, like who's old and grumpy, like, fine, you don't want to come. And I look over at Bob and Sam and I go, hey, I can get you in there safely to help these people. Are you in or not? And they're probably going to say, yeah, let's do it. Like, and that's the difference, right? If I look a guy in the face and I say, I can get you in there safely to help these people. Are you in? You can earn their trust. Consider how far that goes, right? On something like this. So, understanding fire behavior, getting some training, some exposure, and just figuring the dangers out, I think is important. Unified command is a big deal. And a lot of that goes down to trust and rapport building. Getting your communication figured out is big. And as you start to get more and more kind of down this rabbit hole as we have a little bit. Again, not saying we've got it all figured out. This is a work in progress, 100%. I hope I'm not conveying otherwise because this is a living document that we're working with on my team. But we've started to do a better job of building some of the contingencies for this stuff on the front end of our operations, right? So we talked about teaching everyone on the team how to use a fire hose. That's a real thing. Welcome to the team, Firefighter 101. Buckle up. But where that's gotten us is now when we do our operational planning, we think about things like, okay, if we're going to be working in this area, where are the nearest hydrants? And if there's a hydrant, where can I park the fire truck? Because one of the things about where the fire truck can be, understanding how far away from a hydrant they can work is important. How you're going to get them in and out, especially when you set up like a big old command post somewhere. Like, is the engine going to be able to drive through those roads and whatever? That can be a factor. One noteworthy thing is fire engines, because they hold a bunch of water, actually provide some pretty decent cover. They provide some ballistic protection. In fact, in that incident I told you about where the guy set his house on fire, he went and shot the EMTs in the ambulance and went back and ambushed the firefighters and stuff. In that incident, one of the things, there was a bunch of bullet strikes on the engine, and some of the guys attributed the protection of that engine probably helped prevent fatalities. Now, whether that's true or not, I mean, who knows? But the idea is it does provide some level of concealment and cover, right? Some ballistic protection. Remember that the engineer has to work on the left side, typically, of the fire engine. And so if you are doing one of these operations, consider how they're going to approach and park so that the guy that's working on the left side of that engine can be in an advantageous position, right, to use that cover. Stupid little detail, But these are the sorts of things that we've started to build into our operational planning, are those kinds of things. If we think that might be a threat, that someone might start setting stuff on fire, or we have we're getting that vibe, we might call the fire station ahead of time, get the captain on the phone and be like, hey, we're working in your area. We just want to let you know this is what we have. These are some things that we've considered. Just a heads up. We've got our tactical paramedics on our team from our fire department now that usually handle a lot of that stuff for us. They speak the lingo. They can get them on the phone and usually do a good job of that. But where that gets us is if there's any inkling that someone is going to start setting stuff on fire, we're probably going to come in like preemptively and start wetting that place. We'll start taking out windows and doors and start spraying fire hoses and saturate the house or the apartment and make it a lot harder to set stuff on fire.
Yeah.
Right?
Consider environmental risk factors and subject risk factors. Does this person have a history of arson? Have they tried to set fire to you before? That would be a clue, right? Yeah. Is it a wooden shack? Are you in the middle of a brush field? Recognize when you're standing in a kill zone. Right. And if you're looking at the pre-hit intel and you're like, oh, this is a fire trap, hey, that's your clue. Give the fire department a ring-a-ling.
And that sounds like, I know that sounds far-fetched, like, oh, I'm sure they're just going to tell us. Actually, yeah, we've had a lot. I tell you this because I will burn this place down. I mean, okay. Yeah, there was a house fire at that house that his parents died in, right, previously. And so, granted, that was a 911 dispatch type of call. Like that one, there wasn't any intel gathering at that phase of it. But we had another one where a guy started setting stuff on fire, and it was confusing because there was fire damage to the front of the house. And if we had looked at the call history on that house a little bit sooner, we would have seen that he set the house on fire before. So the intel is often there. It actually, in at least a couple of cases, it was available, right? If we had looked for it ahead of time. And I've also been on calls where someone is holding, it's like a hostage barricade type of scenario, and the guy barricaded inside has said that he's thinking about setting the place on fire. Yeah. It's real life. Like,
so fire's a weapon, but so is water, right? And so if you got the hoses, yeah, let's make it wet. Let's make it real wet.
Yeah, we're going to make it hard to set, especially like an apartment building. I think, like, again, that's happened to us enough times, and there's usually other people in those buildings. Like, you can evacuate it, but that takes time. And so if there is an opportunity to potentially pre-wet something, it is an option if you're able to get that far ahead of it. And sometimes you can't. I acknowledge that, but it's a consideration. On the equipment side of things, I mentioned, and this is a tactical team thing. I don't know how many, you're probably not seeing this a whole lot in like patrol settings, but we do have and train with self-contained breathing apparatus for like, if you think about like a lot of those like clandestine labs and stuff like that, there's those potentially oxygen deprived environments that we can go in with breathing apparatus, and we train in those, we shoot with those, we do all kinds of stuff, but they are not fire rated. And by that, what I mean is they attach to our regular gas masks, and they are not intended to withstand heat. So yes, it might provide oxygen. It might also melt to your face. So watch out for that. This is, again, one of those things about understanding the limitations, right? Understanding like fire behavior stuff, and then also recognizing that, okay, you have SCBA, cool, but do you know whether or not it can withstand heat? And making sure that you have the proper equipment. And if not, that's fine, but just know the limitation.
While we're on that, I want to talk about flammable clothes real quick. So, there is a difference between fire resistant and heat resistant, kind of like what Mike just said.
Yeah.
Sometime take an old like Under Armour t-shirt, whatever t-shirt you wear under all your kit, and just toss it in a lit barbecue and see what it does. It'll be science. Educational, right? Yeah, for science. And this is actually one of the more interesting risk management thought experiments to me. So as a military pilot, we are required, we have regulations that say thou shalt wear flame retardant clothing. And that's usually cotton, natural fibers, aramid, undershirts, under a Nomex flight suit, right? That's a typical green onesie flight suit, and even our camo flight suits now are Nomex. But, for the last 20 years, I spent most of that in Iraq or Afghanistan or Arizona during the summer, where it was 169 degrees outside. And I would have been a heat stress injury many of those times if I had done everything the military had told me to do. It turned out wearing the Under Armour actually helped, right? It's a wicking layer, right? Drip drop oral rehydration solution helped. And I haven't been on fire once so far, knock on wood. So I'm not going to tell you what to do. But I think it's actually an interesting dilemma. Like the higher probability, lower severity of being a heat stress injury versus the higher severity, lower probability of being a fire injury or burn injury, right? And there's a difference between flash fire and heat resistant, like walking into a burning building versus just, you catch the fireball, right? So make good risk decisions about what you're wearing.
Yeah, you haven't been on fire, but I believe your airplane has once. It was on the ground, but
more than once. But yes.
So yeah,
true.
So there's that.
Yeah.
Other little equipment things that have helped as far as on the innovation side. One of our fire captain tactical paramedics on our team fabricated a big metal bracket that goes on to, there's like a ram that fits onto the front of our armored truck. There's several pieces that you can add to make it long, so you can drive the truck up and use the front of the thing to basically push someone's front door open or take out a wall or whatever. And he welded together a big bracket that we could strap onto this thing with tie-down straps and attach a fire hose to the front of it, so we can use the front of that ram piece to push open a door or punch a hole in a wall, and then had a valve at the back of the truck. So from our armored vehicle, we can, knock down a front door and spray water into a house. It's pretty badass. I'm pretty sure when he retires in a couple years, he's going to probably make $1 million for building and selling that thing. But it was pretty cool.
Relatedly, don't you guys have like a box for tear gas, like to keep it from setting the building on fire?
Yeah, there's a couple. So back in the day, we fabricated one, right? So some of the canisters that put out the biggest payload, if you were trying to saturate an entire house full of tear gas, are burning munitions. And so they generate a lot of heat, right? Because it's burning the payload. So we basically created this contraption. It was 2 ammo cans. It was a smaller can inside a bigger ammo can. And we used bicycle spokes and a wooden handle. And we'd take the pins out of the tear gas grenades. We'd put 2 of them in there. We'd put the bicycle spoke through it inside this ammo can, close the lid so it created some standoff. So the heat, basically like a heat sink, right? To dissipate some of the heat. And we had a bunch of holes in the side of it so the gas could escape. And we'd put these 2 gas cans and the 2 gas grenades inside of it, walk up to the, however you're putting the gas in, whether it's on the robot or through a window, whatever, you'd pull the handle with the bicycle spokes and toss the thing inside and off it goes. Someone out there has actually manufactured something that does a similar thing now that we have that works really, really good. And I'm sad to report that we don't get to use it as much as I wish we could, but it's pretty cool. And it puts out a lot of gas, like a lot of gas. But yeah, so that is a thing. Another little thing to consider, we've talked about like the civil unrest and protests, like guys throwing Molotov cocktails or setting buildings on fire, arson type stuff. One of the things we've talked about in terms of tactical response to those is staging one of those like brush fire trucks, like a water tender. It's different than a fire engine. It has a bigger water payload because it's intended to be able to like go out into wildland situations, brush fires and such, and carry a bunch of water. And so it doesn't pump as well as a fire engine would from a hydrant, but it is more mobile. And so we've talked about pre-staging those and deploying those with some of our guys on it. So if we needed to get around to deal with fires kind of on the spot, that would be another scenario thing that we've considered. So just some contingencies. Like I said, this has been a work in progress for us. I think the biggest thing is to put some thought into it ahead of time and to have some sense of what you're doing. I mean, half of the things that we did when we were doing the trial and error on this, in talking with the fire guys afterwards, they're like, that's a dumb idea. I'm like, oh, well, tell me more. Wish I would have known that sooner. Well, right.
Bring me some smart ideas and we'll go from there. Right.
And so there's that. And then past that, it's getting that unified command, right? Face-to-face communication between the people on scene that are in charge, building trust and rapport and making sure you iron out the communications, and then understanding that like we all have our differences, but we also have a lot of similarities in this, right? Like we're all here to save lives and serve the greater good. And so if you can like ground yourselves in like, hey, let's build some trust and work together, let's problem solve. Like how can we make this okay for both of us and be on the same page? That goes a long way. And as much as you're probably going to have to do it at 2 o'clock in the morning somewhere. That's on the side of the road. That's real life. But to any degree that you can get ahead of it, I encourage you to do that. And hopefully this was some food for thought to get you in the right direction. If this is something that you or your team or agency or organization is dealing with or has thought about or has other stuff, like please reach out to us. I want to hear about it. Like I said, this is very much a living, when I talk about like our lesson plan on this is a living document, our SOP, like whatever you want to call it, work in progress. And so I am genuinely curious what other people are doing. So reach out. You can email us, info@tacticaltangents, shoot us a message on social media. If we don't answer, just bug us because lots of spam, but I want to know. So reach out. I think that's all I got, Jim.
I want to go back to the Sun Tzu stuff because he's my dude for combat considerations, because this really does have a combat nexus to it. If you're a military cat or if you're in facility security, you're responsible for any big facility. Say you run security for the Raytheon plant in Arizona, or you run a national lab or a reactor or a power generating plant. I want you to stop and think about, like, what am I going to do if someone tries to set this place on fire? Because they might, right? Really stop to look at your vehicles and your facilities and ask if you're doing all you can to bring down the severity if a fire is brought to you. And I realize that isn't always easy. I realize you got a bunch of other things you also have to consider, but this is a real threat and it's been around forever and it's going to continue happening. We are seeing it live, like I said, in Ukraine and Russia. I'm pretty sure the country of China at some point has read Sun Tzu. They've probably gotten to that chapter, right? And it's especially hard in a literal combat zone, right? You're living out of tents at best in some cases. Like, I understand it's hard, but also maybe keeping your guys in wooden tents any longer than you have to, probably not a good idea, right? I think maybe if you've got fuel stores, you probably need to have some plan to keep the fire off of them. And it sounds silly, but like maybe you need to make sure that annual, like how to use a fire extinguisher, computer-based training that everyone has to just like click through. Well, make sure it actually gets looked at. Like, hey guys, have we actually used the fire extinguisher? If not, take your youngins out and have them use a goddamn fire extinguisher. You'd be amazed how many grown adults have never used one. And
pull the pin and throw it.
Pull the pin and throw it. There are actual things you're supposed to do with a fire extinguisher. That might be a good opportunity. Bring the fire department out. Hey, teach us some stuff. And they'll come out with, they're the like, what is it? The fire dog and you're change out the batteries, your smoke detectors, and be like, okay, yeah, got it. But also, hey, fire department guy, let's talk about how actually we need to attack this fire until you get here and help us. Right? I think that's a valuable conversation. Maybe do that after the big police versus fire department softball tournament or whatever it is you guys do. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be hard to grab a few Costco pizzas or something and go to the fire station one day, to tabletop something. Just like, hey guys, how would you feel about, and just get that conversation going. I mean, what are the risks? What are the dangers? What would you say if I was going to do X? Would you tell me I'm an idiot? You know, and why? And I think you'll find that it's funny. There's always that like rivalry, right? Public safety and stuff. But like having also worked a lot in EMS and as a medic on my team and closely with the fire department over a number of years, that culture is a lot more approachable than maybe a lot of cops give it credit for. And maybe just go knock on the door one day and be like, hey guys,
walk in with some humility.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm like, hey guys, like I want to run some stuff by you. Like, would you be up for lunch one of these days? Like your next shift, I can come by and bring some pizzas and we can, you know, or ice cream. Firefighters love ice cream, dude, you know? But
and also invite them out
it's
to
a lot
your
more approachable, I think, than you think.
Yeah, and also invite them out to your range. Right? Like you can do a little back and forth.
Something. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, cool. I thought this was a good talk. Fire is a weapon. This is a thing that Mike and I have both been like thinking about for a while. Like this is a thing we gotta start attacking. As you listen to this, if you have some ideas, if there's something we didn't hit that we should have, go ahead and hit us up in the comments. We want to hear from you. If you have stories or vignettes that we need to hit, specifically about this topic, we'd love to hear about them. I think that's all I got. Be safe out there. Be smart out there.
All right, guys, that's all we got for tonight. This episode is brought to you by 09 Holsters. We talk a lot about people, ideas, and hardware on this show, so when we invest in equipment, we always think in terms of experience first. 09 is helping you figure out how to carry the gear you need to be effective. They are built by cops, for cops, with a minimalist design and bomb-proof durability. Radio cases, flashlights, body cameras, even canine remotes, you name it, 09 has been filling a void in tactical duty holsters for more than a decade. Go see what they offer at 09 Holsters, that's ZERO, the number 9, holsters.com. 09, built to win the fight.
And this is Jim. This episode is also brought to you by Manus X. We've talked a lot about the tactical fantasy on this podcast, and one of the quickest ways to break your tactical fantasies and actually improve your performance is by getting real feedback. One of the ways you can do that is with Manus X. You're not going to get better at shooting on your own. You need practice, data, and coaching. And you need to make the most of your ammo with good live and dry fire training. Manus is a family of training devices that tracks you while you train. It times and tracks everything you do in a drill and coaches you as you go. It is indispensable to taking your shooting to the next level. Go find them on manusx.com.
Don't forget that we put out new episodes on the 1st and the 15th of every month. If you like what we're doing, you can head over to Patreon, give us $1 for each new episode. That money's going to go back into bringing you good content. If you want to interact with us, you could find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We are at TacTangents. You can also email info@tacticaltangents.com. All right. That's all we got. Good talk.